Hey guys, Timtra here, otherwise known as Chris, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've read in 2020. Just a little background on myself. I've always been an avid reader. Ever since I was a kid, my parents got me into reading regularly, and so since I've started the channel, I thought this would be a great video to make to share the books that I've read this year and hopefully give you guys an idea of what to read yourselves. I'm a big fan of sci-fi, history, alternate history, and I'm really into learning more about the classics, so you'll notice that this list tilts heavily towards those genres. So to start off here, I'm just going to talk a little bit about each book, what I like and what I don't like, why I read it, and kind of give a general concepts about the book, what it's about, all without spoilers, of course. Since we have 13 books to go through, I'm going to try to keep it short for each book. I don't want to talk too much about the themes or the message of the books themselves because I feel like that is best for people to discover while they're reading it themselves, or to be discussed in a more spoiler review. So if people are interested in a spoiler review or some sort of extended discussion, maybe I would be down to make a separate video for whichever book you guys are interested in the future. My main goal here is just to show off these books and give you a taste of why you might like them. But anyway, let's get right into it. So first up, we have Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, which was published in 1959. I'm a big fan of the Starship Troopers movie, as imperfect as it is, so naturally I really wanted to read this book. It's about a future interstellar humanity which has very militaristic society, where you have to serve in the army or a government in order to have a vote and the rights as a citizen. I don't have a copy of the book with me right here, but I'll just put a picture of it on screen right now. The book follows Johnny Rico through his service in the mobile infantry, against the backdrop of a war with the humans and a bug-like race called the Arachnids. Unlike the movie, the war really takes a backseat to the more philosophical and moral issues that Heinlein discusses through the book. There's far less action, although what is done very well. While I don't agree with a lot of what Heinlein suggests is correct, I do appreciate that it is a lot more in-depth than the movie. The movie has similar themes, though they are portrayed a lot more bluntly and in a different way. Paul Vanderhoven, who directed the movie, really overplayed the themes of the book in order to satirize them, right? Because he didn't agree. So he did that to show why he thought they were wrong, while here, they're played more straight, right? Because this is the original. So I feel like this is a great book, even if many of the themes and opinions are ones that I don't share. I find that even if you disagree with a book, in your mind, you kind of have to work through why you disagree. And I find that as a useful intellectual exercise because every time you challenge your own beliefs or you read something that challenges them, they will emerge stronger if you still have them after being challenged, right? One of the things that I really like about this book is, it was published in 1959, so you can really see the book's influence on modern sci-fi in terms of the concepts, the technology that Heinlein is proposing here. Since it's so influential, you don't even feel really that it's that old. It pretty much is the first book that kickstarted, for example, the concept of space marines. The mobile infantry go from planet to planet, being shot at the surface in drop pods, just like Halo or something, to fight their enemies. In addition to drop pods, the book also contains one of the first depictions of power armor in sci-fi. The suits the mobile infantry wear protect them from environmental threats like radiation and boost their natural abilities to the point where they can literally jump for miles, all while chucking nuclear rockets and hand grenades. One of my favorite aspects of sci-fi is contemplating future technologies. So that really does it for me and makes the book really worth reading, in my opinion, in addition to the whole philosophical aspect. So if you enjoy reading classic sci-fi and are interested in the ways that authors can use sci-fi and fiction to explore political and social ideas, I would check this book out, as Heinlein tends to do this pretty well in his books, even if you disagree with him. Speaking of social and political ideas, the next book is also from Heinlein and is pretty much him doubling down on that idea. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is the second book of Heinlein's that I read this year, and is his classic space libertarian epic about a lunar colony rebelling from the corrupt and authoritarian powers on Earth that hold its yoke. I myself am not a libertarian, but I have to give him credit for portraying it in the most realistic way that I have seen it done. The lunar colonies in the book were created as penal colonies, similar to Australia, and as a result, it's much more understandable that the frontier society that develops there would develop an independent streak, especially since all of the countries of the world send their political prisoners there. Probably not a good idea if you want to keep a colony under control. You don't want to send a bunch of political people there, but I digress. Like The Expanse, I like how Heinlein explores the effect of living in an extreme environment on the people and the societies that develop in an extraterrestrial habitat. So people who spend a long time on the moon in this book undergo irreversible physiological changes that make returning to Earth extremely uncomfortable. Think about, if you've ever seen The Expanse, think about how people who grew up in 0G are very skinny and they have lots less bone density so that they can't support themselves in Earth gravity. Another aspect is the fact that the colony has a female to male ratio of 2 to 1. I guess because Heinlein assumes that women get incarcerated less than men. I don't know if that is any way accurate or true, but we have to suspend our disbelief and just assume that. It does let him explore some interesting concepts, though, like how he thinks this would result in the lunar society being much more matriarchal, because women are rarer and being valued more. And he does take his time to explain how this could result in some more interesting, like, family dynamics, because, like he does in his other work. I haven't read many of his other works, but according to my research, he does explore a lot of that idea. I also want to give him credit for his portrayal of how a successful revolution would take place. With the colony being in a precarious position and having a high power imbalance with the Earth forces, Earth easily being able to take them out militarily if it was fought conventionally, the technologies and methodologies that the characters in the books employ to overcome Earth are pretty unique, and I've seen it done similarly, but I think this is probably, considering the time the book was published, the first time it was at least portrayed it this way in literature. Just like Starship Troopers, I think this is a must-read for any sci-fi fan, and I'm looking forward to reading Stranger in a Strange Land, which is also one of Heinlein's most famous works. Alright, so next up we have Neuromancer by William Gibson. Published in 1984, Neuromancer is kind of the big daddy of the cyberpunk genre. And, as somebody who loves sci-fi, as I already mentioned, this was already on my must-read list for a while. Neuromancer follows Case, an expert hacker who was betrayed and had his nervous system crippled, cutting him off from accessing cyberspace, until a mysterious new employer recruits him for a dangerous heist against a powerful artificial intelligence, giving him the chance to regain his former life. But not everything about the job and his employer is as it seems. So this book is one which I completely misunderstood prior to reading. I don't know where I got this idea, probably from the name of the book, which gave me wizard vibes, but in retrospect it's obviously not to something else. I thought that people in this world kind of use like hacking like spells, kind of like how they were used in Cyberpunk 2077. Maybe that might be where I got it from too. I also had the misconception the book had a very old-timey view of future technology, which is kind of true as there's no internet, but we can't really blame him for not predicting that. And cyberspace in the book is very familiar to the internet. There is a moment, however, where Gibson makes 3 megabytes of RAM seem like a gold mine. Like, black market dealers are killing people over it. Like, Case almost gets killed because of it. Like, that's very early on in the book, don't worry. But besides these hiccups, I think it actually holds up pretty well. Like, it does feel like a future. This book has become very influential. It actually is one of the reasons that your grandmother says cyberspace, because it kind of popularized that term. And words also like the Matrix movies took direct inspiration from this book, kind of like, especially if you've seen the Matrix, it's like a VR world, right? So entering the Matrix, right? And helped to popularize the concepts of virtual reality. So that's how hacking is done in this universe, essentially. Like, you cast your mind into the computer network through a VR device, and it goes into cyberspace, which is like the internet that connects all computers. World building, really good. Again, I feel like I'm going to be repeating myself a lot in this video because I read a lot of good books this year, and I'm a big world building guy, so be ready for that. Anyway, so the book takes place over numerous future world locations, the least spoilery of which I can talk about is Night City. Not to be confused with Cyberpunk 2077's Night City, that which actually took the name of that Night City from this book as like an homage. But anyway, Night City is a place in the Tokyo megacity full of crime and black market deals. It really sets the stage for the cyberpunk world. It's like this dark undercity between 2 bigger cities. Massive pollution, clouding the sky, gray market cybernetic implants, and organ harvesting happening everywhere. As someone who really enjoys good world building, I really enjoyed this part. And also, not just that, but the rest of the book too. The book is the first in the Sprawl trilogy, and I eventually plan to read the other 2 in the future, so I'm looking forward to that. Alright, so number 4 we have Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, published in 1961. Catch-22 is the classical satirical anti-war book by Joseph Heller about a bomber pilot, John Yossarian, who during World War II basically just wants to avoid dying at all costs. It flips the traditional stories on their head. You know, he doesn't want to be a hero or anything, he's just gonna be faking being sick as long as possible to avoid doing more bombing runs and potentially getting killed. The Germans aren't even really the enemy here, it's the military which is sending people to their deaths in a war that they all really don't want to fight, and a ridiculous bureaucracy which doesn't let them leave, even when they've served their required time. Of course, this book is the originator of the classic phrase, a catch-22, which is a ridiculous circumstance or rule which prevents a solution in and of itself. So I found this book legitimately funny, like it made me laugh quite a bit at times, which is difficult for a book to do. Because usually when I'm reading a book and I find something funny, I kind of just giggle or do that thing where you kind of blow air out your nose, like, you know? The type of humor is like a Monty Python-esque skit, I really felt. And it really feels like you're reading a description or a script of one of those skits. Like in the way that people are described to look and how they move around and, you know, they're given names which kind of like obviously dictate their personality. So I thought it was really funny in that regard. But the book also has some moments of sadness, horror, and the insanity of war that really nail home the anti-war message of the book. Of course, if it was all emotional highs and no lows, this book would have been probably mistaken as just a comedy about a lazy pilot. Darkness needs to be there in the comedy to really highlight the insanity of it all, right? After all, it's kind of dark comedy. I think this is a definite read for anyone interested in World War II or in anti-war literature. I'm not big into the latter, but I definitely appreciate it. Number 5 is Winston Churchill by Robert Louis Taylor, and this is a biography about Churchill's life up until the book was written, and so that was 1954, so Churchill was actually alive when this came out. Rather than focusing on world events, it serves to provide a window into the life of the man himself, going into more detail about his childhood and early adult life, you know, his daily routines, and giving us an insight on why he believed in the things he did. So honestly, the reason I decided to pick up this book was simply because I found it at my grandparents' place, and my grandmother said that my grandfather liked it, and I'm interested in World War II anyway, so I decided why not, I can read a little bit about Churchill. I find the World War II period really interesting to learn about, and of course Churchill was a really huge figure in that period. Being a biography, the book kind of helped me get a better understanding of who he was, before his finest hour during the war. I knew he served in the Boer War, for example, but it was really great to hear some more in-depth accounts. The story of how he escaped from the Boer prisoner of war camp and basically walked all his way to Portuguese East Africa springs to mind. Or all of his antics during World War I, for example. If I remember correctly, there's some stories about how he used to sit outside in a bathtub reading books, not obviously on the front line, but pretty close to the front line, for a lot of the mornings of the war. That's just kind of wild to me. And with all the danger this guy put himself in, like he had 3 different plane crashes in his life, we should be thanking our lucky stars that he was alive for round 2 with Germany. So I think this is a good book, but you do have to be aware that it was written in the 1950s, so it might be limited as an actual historical source. Historians and biographers have for sure had much more time by now to unearth documents, clarify sources, etc. So I cannot really speak to the academic aspect of the book. There might be better out there, and honestly there for sure is. You can really tell that it was written during the Cold War as well, since it was steeped pretty heavily in anti-communist, anti-leftist, and even a pinch of anti-feminist rhetoric, which did get quite annoying after a bit. If you're a big history buff, I think I can recommend this to you, but honestly, at that point you should be going to the library and getting a more modern book about Churchill, just so that you can actually get more in-depth facts, a little bit less probably biased account. That's for real here. Like, you're probably not going to find this book even at a library. Alright, so next up we have a work which many people would say is genre defining. You know, it influenced Star Wars, Star Trek, tons of other sci-fi. It's one of the best-selling sci-fi books ever released. And of course, I think many of you, if you know sci-fi, will have guessed that this is Dune by Frank Herbert, released in 1965. So I feel like everybody knows about Dune, but way fewer people, especially in my generation, have actually read the book. Which, I mean, you could say that is true for most things, but I feel it's especially true of Dune, because I even thought, like, man, before I read the book, Dune, oh, it's so influential, but you know, by now it's probably cliched, right? I always thought I needed to read the book, but I did kind of underestimated it. Like, I knew it was going to be great, but like, I underestimated its greatness, honestly. When I finally got around to watching it because of the trailer that released for the movie, I figured that, you know, I have to read the book before the movie comes out. Boy, do I wish I had read the book sooner. It is phenomenal, guys. It is phenomenal. The narrative of Dune is set in the distant future within a feudal interstellar society, in which noble houses compete for and control planetary fiefs. Paul Atreides is a member of a family which has recently been given ownership of the planet Arrakis, and Arrakis is the only source of spice. The spice must flow, the drug which enhances mental abilities and extends people's lifespans. So the extrasensory abilities that the spice endows also enable interstellar navigation and travel. And since Arrakis is the only planet that can produce the spice, you can obviously see how controlling the planet is a dangerous affair, with rival houses eager to try and steal it from you, the local population resisting foreign control, and the inhospitable desert climate of the planet being an enemy in and of itself. This planet is more dangerous and more desertified than most deserts we would consider on Earth. So I initially struggled with getting into the book. This was one of the books that you pick up, and I read the first chapter, and then I put it down, and I kind of just procrastinated on getting back into it. I think for me, because of the setting, it's in the far, far future, like tens of thousands of years. There are a lot of unconventional names, which I really struggled with at first, and it kind of made it harder for me to like grasp the initial plot. However, the second time I tried, I got hooked. I just flew through the pages. I think if you're having this kind of trouble, just really stick to it. Use the glossary and key terms section if you need, and you won't regret it. Trust me. And especially since, like, midway through the book, you've kind of mastered all of those terms, and you kind of feel that kind of gratification, like, I understand what's going on in this world more. So definitely stick with it if you struggle at first. So as I mentioned, I'm a huge world building guy, and this book is pretty much the king of world building, all right? So Herbert really put a lot of thought and care into designing the world and the people in it, not just Arrakis, but the whole ecology of Arrakis that ties into the aspects of the plot. So he actually figured out like how the plants and the sandworms and everything ties into the planetary ecology, and basically found a way to tie that into the plot in a way which is really creative in my opinion. And even if you look at the back here, I'll put it on screen, but there's like a whole map of the planet, like at least the habitable zone, and everything. You know, I love that stuff. I love this kind of stuff. It's great. The explanations for the cultures that evolved through the explained history of the universe make sense, like the feudal system that humanity developed to manage governing various colonies among the stars, or the way that the Freemen, which are the indigenous human population of Arrakis, interact with the desert and have so much of their identity around preserving water, right? Because the planet is pretty much antithetical to human life, unless we, you know, adapt and survive to it. I do have one criticism though, and that's kind of maybe after seeing the movie trailer and having my expectations raised a little bit. I feel like some characters, like Chani, especially Chani, could have used some more growth and exposure. Based on the movie trailer, I was really interested in seeing and learning more about her and seeing how she reacted to the things that Paul does, but she took more of a minor character's role in this, which is unfortunate, especially given what happened, like where she is later in the book. I think it would have been nicer if he had expanded a little bit more on her, but I guess that's what it is, right? I would definitely highly recommend this, as you know, it's one of the most influential sci-fi works possible. So if you're interested in sci-fi, you definitely need to go out and read this. I could talk way more about this one, but honestly, you should really experience it for yourself. Hey guys, so you can probably already tell by the title, but when I was editing this video, I realized it was like 2 times longer than I wanted it to be, so I decided to break it up into 2 parts and release it in 2 videos so that you didn't have to commit to a 40-minute video, and you could kind of come back to the second video once you've watched the first, if you wanted to. So if you want to watch the second video, I'm going to put the link to that in one of the end cards coming up right now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in part 2.